following presentation was recorded at the Academy for Lifelong Learning. The Academy provides adults ages 50 and older a learning environment of continued personal and intellectual growth. These classes are held in either the East Montgomery County Improvement District building or in the LSC Atascocita Center. For more information, please call 281-312-1750 or visit the website at lonestar.edu/all-kingwood.
To begin talking about William Walker, it might be best when you're examining William Walker to kind of pick a day in his life. He had a lot of interesting days, and examine what he might have thought was going on with his life at that time. In this case, I decided to pick probably the most unusual day in his life, and that was the day William Walker became the president of Nicaragua, the only American to ever become the president of a foreign country. So that makes him pretty unusual. Now, it's the way that he becomes president that is a little iffy, but he is. Till this day, he's the only American to become president of a foreign country. So on that day, he held a party, and he was not one to party. This is him smiling. Okay, so he was very austere, and you'll find out why in a little bit, at least why I think he was austere. But at this party, lots of people were drinking, and he kind of sat back, and they said he would sip his wine, but he wasn't really drinking quite a bit. And there were a lot of toasts to him. He's surrounded by Americans, other Americans. There are a few Nicaraguans there, but mainly it's English-speaking Americans at this party. And as the toasts go around, one of his lieutenants, someone who has fought for him, raises the glass and says to Uncle Billy. And everybody looked puzzled. Who's Uncle Billy? You see, he's only in his mid-30s at that time. Probably nobody's uncle at that time. And everybody looked kind of, who does he mean? And then Walker, they said his face kind of cracked when he finally smiled, because he doesn't smile. And his smile gets bigger and bigger. And then he throws his head back and starts laughing, because he realizes he's Uncle Billy. I think he's laughing at something else, too. I think he's laughing because of the absurdity that he's the president of Nicaragua, this kid from Nashville. Though he is also very self-confident, so maybe not. Maybe he just thought, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. And I think that's, again, maybe why he's laughing is he's going, how did I get here? So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at how William Walker became the president of Nicaragua. A couple things about him, just so because he is a unique individual, brilliant. Started college when he was 12. Now, this is back in the 1830s, late 30s, early 40s. So you will, if you read about those times, you'll read about people going to college early. But still, it wasn't everyone. It still meant he had great potential. He graduated from the University of Nashville when he was 14. And then he went to Europe and studied medicine. Now that really is unusual, someone from America going to Europe and studying medicine. And when he was 15 and 16, he studied medicine and came back to America and began to practice medicine at 16. But medicine bored him. He didn't like it at all. So he just started studying law. He'll just become a lawyer. Now, again, back then, it was a lot easier to become a lawyer than it is today. You read the law with someone else. And you could say, okay, it's been 6 months, I think I know the law. And if the person you read with, who was already a lawyer, agreed, then you could be a lawyer. So he's a lawyer now. He's a doctor and he's a lawyer. You could almost say he's going to become an Indian chief because he's going to be the president of Nicaragua, where there's lots of Indians. Anyway, so he's a doctor and a lawyer, and he moved from Nashville and he went to New Orleans. And while he's in New Orleans, he meets the love of his life. He falls in love and they become engaged. And then, as often happened in New Orleans in those days, yellow fever struck. And I was reading one particular book on Walker, and the way they put it was, it swept her out of his life. She died. And when she died, something died in him. You can see, it's my kind of pop cult or pop psychology view, that's when, to hide his grief, he decided he had to do something big with his life. Because from this point on, that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to do something big with his life. Now, whether he would have done that if his fiancée had lived is another question entirely. At any rate, he leaves New Orleans and he goes out to California, where he decides, I don't like being a lawyer either. And he becomes a journalist. And so he's going to write about the very different things that are going on in California during the gold rush. So that's some things about him personally. So anyway, he goes out to California, and again, some very unique things about him. But I think, and this is just my theory, that no one's kind of put that out there, but I think that it is more than that. I think that if William Walker had never existed, and I'm paraphrasing another person, but if William Walker had never existed, we would have invented him. The times would have invented him. It is the times that make William Walker possible. In 5 years, from the time he becomes president, what he did won't be possible. 5 years before that wasn't possible. So it's the times he lived in that made, because he was so singular, because he was so special, that he could hold the reins of those times and become the president of Nicaragua. So I want to kind of look at 4 themes that I think influence him becoming the president of Nicaragua. Manifest destiny. Now, Americans had long believed that we were special people and that we were destined to spread over the entire North American continent. But in the 1840s, someone actually gave it the name Manifest Destiny. And he's growing up in that time, and so he's going to, and because all Americans believed it. When I study this, no one goes, oh no, we're not going to take it all. That was just something you grew up with. At the time, we didn't have all of North America, but we were going to spread over it. And in fact, we were going to have more of it than what we do now. The map in people's minds, oftentimes, included Canada and Mexico, and a lot of Central America, and heck, South America too, why not? There were lots of people who believed that. He would have grown up believing that. There's a particular manifestation of manifest destiny that's going to help a lot in this situation. Without it, none of this would have probably happened. And that is the gold rush in California in 1849. Remember, he goes out there. He's going to go out in the 1850s, but that's the case for lots and lots of people. Not everybody could get out there all at once. I think I've mentioned this before. My great-great-grandfather, a German immigrant, settled in Illinois, and then when the gold rush occurred, he left. He went and went out to California and apparently found enough gold that when he made it back to Illinois, he was able to buy a lot of land, which I saw none of, but yeah. He had 13 kids, so I think that's probably why. But anyway, the gold rush is going to help manifest destiny. Everybody get out here to California. Slavery. In the 1850s, slavery is going to be the issue that is tearing the country apart. And we are, I'm not going to emphasize it as much as some people talking about William Walker would do, but I will talk about it. And because in his personal life, he was supposedly anti-slavery, even though he was from Nashville. But as president of Nicaragua, he will reinstate slavery. And in its place, I'll tell you why he does that. But slavery is definitely an issue. And finally, commerce. That is that's San Francisco Bay, and all those pointy things are the masts of ships, sailing ships, arriving in San Francisco Bay. The market revolution has occurred, and Nicaragua is Nicaragua because of commerce. Because besides William Walker, I'm going to mention someone who is probably you've all heard of, if you never even heard of William Walker, and that is Cornelius Vanderbilt. Cornelius Vanderbilt is going to be his enemy. So, and that is because he is involved, he is invested in Nicaragua. And I'll explain why, and it has to do with San Francisco as well. So I think these four currents or trends in American history is what allowed William Walker to realize that special something that he wanted to do with his life, that being big with his life, though it's not going to end in the way that he wanted to. When I talk about the day he became president, that was the apex. In fact, he may have already been on the slide down, because it's not going to end well for William Walker. All right, so let's just take a quick look at some of how these trends are going to influence Walker. Manifest destiny was a term that John L. O'Sullivan, a correspondent, came up with. But again, that's an idea that had been, Thomas Jefferson would have been very comfortable with the idea. In fact, he spoke of spreading across the continent. He just never called it manifest destiny. John L. O'Sullivan always gets credit for coming up with the term manifest destiny. God has given North America to the Anglo-Saxon race. They called it an experiment of liberty and federated self-government. That's what they're taking across. When Americans thought of manifest destiny, it was not just gimme, gimme, gimme. There's certainly some gimme, gimme, gimme to it. But they also thought that they were spreading liberty and that they were bringing the experiment of self-government to those lands. That's kind of the noble part of it. There's a problem with that. The lands aren't empty. There are Indians in those hills looking down on these people going out there. But still, that's what manifest destiny believed. If you were being noble about it, this could motivate you. This is just a map that shows how we did expand. The green area, that area is what Thomas Jefferson believed would be the United States of America. He thought that our natural boundaries were the Mississippi River. He believed that Anglo-Saxons would spread across the river and create more republics, but he didn't believe that the United States itself would spread clear across the continent. And yet, it was Thomas Jefferson who purchased Louisiana, this whole area here, which doubled our size and virtually guaranteed we were going to have all of North America. So this shows us acquiring different lands. There are racist manifestations of manifest destiny, what happens to the Indians, and this applies to Walker, does slavery follow the flag? As we expand westward, is slavery going to remain only in the South, or will it go out into those western lands? California, Southerners took their slaves out there. If you're a free white man looking for gold and you're knee deep in that freezing water and you look down the way and there's a gang of slaves working for a guy who's having his lunch up on the shore, you probably don't like that. That's unfair competition. One of the reasons why California asked to come into the Union as a free state. But Southerners, on the other hand, certainly believed that their version of self-government included slavery and that they had the right to bring their slaves out there. So that's part of Manifest Destiny as well, and that's going to plug into Walker in Nicaragua. Okay, the gold rush. I mentioned the gold rush is one of the trends. The gold rush, they discovered the gold in 1848. They rushed out in 49, found a football team. That's wonderful. It works for y'all. Yeah. I do the same joke for my students because it wakes them up. This is usually what we think of when we think of the gold rush. We think of a covered wagon and crossing those barren areas to find the gold. That is not the way the vast majority of people made it to California. We like to think of it that way, but that's not the way it happened. Instead, you took a ship. Actually, you took two ships, unless you went all the way around South America. If you look at this, this is an ad, either in New Orleans or New York, because those were the two main ports that people were leaving out of, saying, get ready, we are going, California Steam Navigation Company, take a steamship to Nicaragua. It's not Panama. Nicaragua was the course that they took, and I'll explain why in a moment. But that was the way most people went. Again, my great-great-grandfather, I don't know how he got out there, but I would imagine the chances are great that he made it out there by going by steamship. And they're all looking for the gold. This is what it would have looked like. These are the steamships, the kind of steamships that they used. And you leave New York, you go, this again is Nicaragua. Panama is down here. You'll see, I'm going to explain why Nicaragua as opposed to Panama. Panama is certainly narrower. That's why we chose it for the canal. But this is pre-canal, and that makes the big difference. Nicaragua is closer. So the ship gets to the crossing more quickly than if you sail the extra days to get to Panama. That alone is one of the reasons. It's just less mileage to get to Nicaragua. Here's a close-up of southern Nicaragua. This is Costa Rica. And what you would do, now this shows the arrow coming this way, but actually people coming from the eastern United States would come down here to the mouth of the San Juan River. They would get on a boat on the San Juan River, and they would sail all the way up to Lake Nicaragua. The San Juan River empties, it starts in the Lake Nicaragua and runs out to the ocean. So you could take a boat all the way. Then you take a boat all the way across Lake Nicaragua, and you only have 12 miles that you have to walk or take a horse. Whereas with Panama, at that time when you arrived in Panama, you had to walk or take a stage or something across through those jungles. So it was quicker to do this. The ships on the Caribbean side were owned by Cornelius Vanderbilt. Okay. On the other side, they were owned by someone else at first. There was a lot of fighting over the different routes. Now, on the rivers, Vanderbilt owns that company as well, on the smaller paddle boats that are going up the river. It was a different company called the Transit Company, because Vanderbilt made a deal with the Nicaraguan government at that time, where he was going to pay them $10,000 a year for the right to cross and a percentage of profits. But what he did was, now that's only on, once you're in Nicaragua, on those paddle boats going up the river. So what he did was he took all expenses from his line that started in New York, and he piled them into the transit company. So the transit company never had a profit, supposedly. And that makes the Nicaraguan government angry, and that'll be important in a little bit. But anyway, this is the San Juan River, which has several rapids. And if you have rapids, you can't get your boat over the rapids. You can't tell it here, but that is very, very shallow. And those, the first boat that Vanderbilt purchased was your typical paddle boat, and it got to here, and it became stranded on the rocks. It couldn't get past that. So now Vanderbilt hears about this, and he says, that's not going to stop me. And he goes down, another paddle boat. When they get close to the rapids, he just takes the lever, again, I don't know about Navy stuff, and he opened it up or tied it down full speed ahead, and he walked it over the rapids. That's what they said. The paddles just looked like a big funny duck hitting the rocks. It wasn't in the water any longer, but he just kept going because he's going to get over those rapids. And he taught his men how to do that as well. So people had to get off, the passengers had to get off and walk a little ways, but to get past these rapids, because he's going to make money off of this. So that's the rapids on the San Juan River. That's Lake Nicaragua with 2 active volcanoes in the middle of it. It is a huge lake. Something else about that lake. And I didn't know that till I started studying William Walker. Freshwater sharks. Freshwater sharks. And it turns out, they used to think this was actually just, they called it shark Nicaragua, some scientific version of that. It turns out it is a bull shark, the most common shark in the world, and that what it did, these, for whatever reason, they swam up the San Juan River from the Caribbean. They went over those rapids, and they get into the lake. And yes, they would eat people if you were swimming there. There's very few of them left because people have been fishing them out. But I would imagine, I like to swim in lakes more than the ocean anyway, but now I'm kind of rethinking it because bull sharks are in the Gulf of Mexico, so they could swimming up to Lake Travis. So anyway, so you've got it's always something.
When they go up the San Jacinto, I'm going to start to worry.
That's right. Well, I don't think anything can live going up the San Jacinto. Again, there are very few of those sharks left, but they, reading about them, because I became fascinated with this, they said you can always find someone living on the shores who can tell you about an uncle or an aunt who wasn't killed. The sharks typically aren't very large, but was attacked. So, oh, and by the way, since they are saltwater fish, the way they do this, it has something to do with internal pressure. They urinate constantly. It's how they maintain themselves in the lake. Yeah, that would be the other thing, absolutely. See, there's all kinds of problems with this route. So you get over to the western side of the lake, and then you take the last 12 miles. Okay. Vanderbilt wasn't happy with the idea of having to, that wears and tears on his ships, having to walk over those rapids every time. So he proposed a canal Before there was a proposal for a Panama Canal, there was a proposal for the Nicaraguan Canal. And if you look at the map, here's the regular route, but then here and here, there's two canals, much shorter than what you would have if you dug a canal in Panama. So from the beginning, Nicaragua was in first place for even getting the canal. It wasn't until later that things are going to switch, and not until Roosevelt, that things are going to switch and they're going to start looking at Panama as a better route. But Vanderbilt controls the transit company. He's proposing a canal, but for him, there's a lot of money in keeping this open. And the Nicaraguan government was very unstable. Nicaragua had only been independent as Nicaragua for about 10 years in the 1850s. Now they had been independent of Spain before that, but what had happened, those Central American countries that we are aware of, except for Panama, because Panama is a special case. We created Panama. But the other countries didn't have to fight for independence. Basically, Spain was falling apart. When Mexico became independent, the province, which was called, all of it was called Guatemala, declared their independence. And so they were a single country. Those 5 countries, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, were people typically refer to it as United States of Central America. Now, they never called themselves that, but they were a republic. And the Nicaragua would have been like a state in that government. So for about 15 years, they were part of that government. Then that broke up. There was no unity, no national identity for these people. They had not had to fight a revolution to say, we are whomever, we are Central Americans, we are whomever. And fighting a revolution gives you national identity. And so these people finally split up. And they still had the same politics, and the politics were divided between 2 parties, and it had nothing to do with the people. Okay, the people are just peasants, and forget about them. It had to do with people of pure Spanish blood who had been born in Central America, Creoles. The Creoles ran things, and there were some who were conservative, and there were some who were liberal. And those 2 groups fight each other for control of the land. And it makes things very unstable, because in all 5 of these countries that kept happening. They all had the same parties. They would cross borders. Guy from the Liberal Party, if let's say Nicaragua went to the conservatives, he'd just go over to Honduras and fight with the Honduran liberals for a while. There's no true identity, national identities for these people, which is going to set up a situation of instability where during one of the revolutions they're going to invite William Walker down. Vanderbilt wants stability. If there's a newspaper article talking about a civil war in Nicaragua, are people going to take his ships to Nicaragua? No, they're not going to. There is a competing line that goes through Panama, which was part of Colombia, by the way. So they're going to go that way, even though it's longer. So he wants stability. All right, now I'm going to talk about filibustering for a little bit, because that is what William Walker is, a filibuster. And I'm not saying he talked a lot, okay? That's what we think of filibustering as today. And that is actually, the word filibuster that we use in the Senate comes from this filibustering, because it's hijacking something. Think about what a senator does. He hijacks the floor, and he's going to talk as long as he can. And that word grows out of this filibustering, which actually grows out of the word freebooter, and a freebooter is a pirate. So filibustering means pirating, being a pirate. And this is one of those things that grows out of that time period that I've been talking about. If we're spreading over the continent, and we've already reached California, for many Americans, well, that's not enough. What's next? Where do we go next? And so it became natural to start looking around. We fought a war with Mexico, right? We took a bunch of their land. We wanted more of their land. We wanted Cuba. That's what we've got here. Cuba was always on our radar because Cuba had slavery. Southerners especially wanted Cuba because you can cut that thing up into about 3 different states. That's 2 slave senators per state who can go to the U.S. Senate and vote against them Yankees. So they watched Cuba a lot. And so there were a lot of people who, we offered to buy Cuba from Spain repeatedly in the 1850s. Spain would refuse, and so it's just like, well, let's just take it anyway. If they won't sell it, we'll just take it. Not from the government, but we start having private soldiers decide, because of manifest destiny, we deserve all of this. You got to think about the mindset. We deserve this anyway. It's part of who we are. And if you're from the South, there's all those slaves. We'll take it and we'll turn it around and we'll make it part of the United States. Cuba was one of the major targets for filibustering. A lot of the filibustering was led by a man named Narciso Lopez, who was not even from Cuba. He was from South America, but he decided that he could break Cuba away from Spain, and so he'd go to the United States and he would advertise for mercenaries. Now, they never called them mercenaries, but another word for freebooter could be mercenaries. And he would talk about freeing Cuba from the reign of the Spanish, and a lot of people, not just from the South, by the way, there were filibusters from all the areas of the United States, but a lot from the South joined him. Remember, I mentioned John L. O'Sullivan. John L. Sullivan financed this guy. He was buying boats for him so that they could load the boats up with filibusters and send them down to Cuba. He invaded 2 different times. Finally, the Cubans, or the Spanish, caught him, and as an execution, they strangled him to death. An American who was the nephew of a U.S. senator was to be executed, and they said, kneel down, don't face us and kneel down. And he said, I'm a free American. If you're going to shoot me in the face. And so he faced them, wouldn't take the blindfold, and was executed. He became a hero in the United States. These filibusters are all viewed, or not by everyone, but certainly in the South, they are viewed as heroes. They're spreading the American way. So Cuba was a really big target. We never ended up getting it, but that was a big target. Mexico. There were filibusters from Texas, though none of them, well, I think there were a couple who actually crossed the border, but there was a whole lot more talking about it. Let's get a bunch of guys together and go down and take northern Mexico. Sam Houston, at the end of his life, proposed going down into Mexico, getting a bunch of Texans together and going down into Mexico. Now, a lot of people think he did that to deflect. This was right at the same time as the Civil War was beginning, that get them involved in fighting in Mexico, they won't have time to leave the Union because he was a Unionist. But still, pick on Mexico. Bunch of private citizens going into Mexico. And here's where we finally get back to Walker. Because William Walker's over there in California, and he's writing about Narciso Lopez. He's writing about what's going on in California. And I guess he just decided it's time to be king. Because he got 44 men, 44, That's not a lot. 44 Americans, we're going to Mexico and we're taking it over. He went to Baja California, Lower California, and he declared the Republic of Sonora. Now, he wasn't fighting anybody, and nobody knew it was a republic, because he just said he was in charge. And those 44 guys, as reported by a California newspaper, were reckless saloon loafers in the dregs of California docks. These are the guys who didn't find the gold. Okay? They may have made it out there, but things did not go well. So now they're looking for something else. So there were always some of these guys. There are always adventurers. Young men were lured into filibustering over and over again. It seemed like something that would be exciting. Now, but in this particular case, these are the guys who've already gone out to California. They tried their luck in the gold fields. They didn't find enough gold. And yeah, might as well go and just shear off a part of 44 people taking that part of California. 33 returned. Took several months, but the government finally went up there and chased them off. They, by the way, there was a group that was coming in from Arizona that was going to help Walker, and they just met the Mexican army, met them at the border and executed all of them and cut off the leader's head. Walker managed to make it back to the United States, where he's put on trial because what he did was illegal. Individual Americans cannot go fight a war in a foreign country. It's against the law. He's put on trial in San Francisco, and it took 8 minutes for the jury to acquit him. Because there's nothing wrong with that. Not if you believe in manifest destiny. We should have Mexico. So he's not been punished for what he's done. In fact, he learned some valuable lessons about how to go about this. So, because the first thing he did was he landed and declared himself president of this Republic of Sonora. That's not the best way to go about it, he's learned. Maybe if he uses a little subterfuge, he can go further, and that's what's going to happen.
LSC TV strives to enrich our viewers' lives with programming designed to increase awareness of local events and issues. LSC TV also produces informational videos about the various programs offered at Lone Star College Kingwood. Finally, LSC TV's broadcast is designed to educate and inform our audience on a variety of subjects with both locally and nationally produced programming. To see our current programming schedule, please visit lonestar.edu/LSCTV.
Every day, I make a difference in somebody's life.
In a hospital or a school.
Or in their home. I work with children.
And the elderly. And anyone in between.
In my job, I have to solve problems creatively.
I use both my mind and my body to help my patients adapt.
To heal.
To live their lives to their fullest.
I am not a hero.
But I work with heroes every day.
What is occupational therapy?
It's helping people learn to live again.
May 25th, 1998, I was on my motorcycle and a drunk driver hit me head on.
13 broken bones. I would say the majority of his 30 surgeries are on the one leg, but they also had surgeries on both hands, both shoulders, both hips.
And I suffered a closed head injury.
He doesn't remember names from one day to the next.
What I couldn't do right after the accident?
Yeah, right, I mean...
I was completely immobile.
He had to relearn to do everything over again. So in much of this he doesn't remember from his head injury.
Right.
But I had to dress him, I had to bathe him, I had to comb his hair and wash his hair and get him ready and actually physically take him and put him in the chair and take him to therapy every day. What they were able to accomplish with him in a short amount of time was a tremendous burden off of me. So once he was able to use his hands again, which is what the focus of his occupational therapy was, he was able then to be able to dress himself and feed himself and take care of all of those daily things that you take for granted.
The job of the occupational therapist is to come in and be sure that every aspect of a person's daily activity can be accomplished. The definition a lot of times for occupational therapy is the pursuit of purposeful activity. Strangely enough, occupational therapy, you hear the word occupation and you think about job. But occupational therapy is not about job. It's about another definition from Webster, which means to occupy time with an activity.
There's so many things I like about my profession. The biggest one is that I help people, that I see progress. They come in with a broken wrist that's healing, very little movement, a lot of swelling. They're painful, they're frustrated, they're angry, and within a week I can see an improvement.
In my experience, the type of personality of a person that would be suited for occupational therapy would have to be a people person, would have to be a fun, compassionate, caring person that is willing to get in what I call your bubble. Personal space. You have to be willing to get into somebody's personal space and be able to provide them the care that they need.
There's a lot of job opportunities. There's always job opportunities in the skilled nursing facilities. Hospitals hire occupational therapy assistants. There's outpatient.
You can work in different fields with different age groups. I've worked in the acute hospital setting. I've worked in a skilled nursing facility. I've worked in the school system.
Some of the long-term career options for OTA is they can take a few steps further to become occupational therapists.
I have gone into more of a marketing realm, again, or an administrative realm where they're head of a rehab department or in charge of a rehab facility.
I would recommend the OTA program at Lone Star Kingwood. Personally, because I was a prior student at Kingwood, and I feel like in my career I have just achieved and just soared to the highest of heights.
They're very enthusiastic about the program, and that's what's important. They go, they want to do the best for the students. They pull in the best teachers they can find, and they have the best opportunities when it comes to clinicals around the city.
I've learned a lot from the teachers. Sometimes you feel like they are working against you, but they are really helping you. They give you hard questions and hard scenarios to think about, but those are all the things that you have to deal with every day when you're at work.
Everything I've learned in school is now coming to fruition. And, you know, we're actually helping people get back to where they were before they had incident.
I would say somebody trying to get off into the medical field, into occupational therapy, it's a very, very good choice you're going to make. There's a lot of people out there that are going through problems, such as all the soldiers coming back from Iraq. We need more people in that field to come in and help. I really think so.
In the belief that all human beings are unique and have the potential to be realized.
I pledge myself to the conscientious and judicial practice of my profession.
I solemnly declare that I will hold and keep sacred
whatever I may learn of the lives of my clients,
seeking to serve and being cognizant of the need to maintain my competence.
I will strive to continue my professional growth.
To this end, that my work may be successful.
I will strive for greater knowledge, skill, and understanding
in this discharge of my duties.
It is with dignity and pride that I prepare to join my colleagues in occupational therapy.
And pledge